Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're revisiting the Mughals. We've
Yay!
touched on them before, but this time,
Right.
instead of dates and battles, we're going to uncover
Right.
their culture and society and politics
Yes.
and how they
Yes.
still influence India today.
Exactly. And that's what makes this era so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just like a static period of rule. It's
Yeah.
like this dynamic journey
Yeah.
of expansion and cultural fusion and administrative innovation
Yeah.
spanning from roughly 1526 to 1857.
So how did this dynasty begin?
Ah.
Originating with Babur,
Yes.
a descendant of Timur,
Uh-huh.
come to dominate such a huge part of India.
Right.
We hear about their military and conquests.
Yes.
But what actually made them successful?
Well, one key factor was their strategic brilliance.
Okay.
Babur's victory at the First Battle of Panipat in 1526
Right.
wasn't just luck. The Mughals really utilized gunpowder technology,
Hmm.
which was pretty new to India at the time. But they also forged strategic alliances with local rulers.
I see.
They understood that to build an empire,
Yeah.
they needed a strong military and a good administration,
Right.
but also the support of the people that they were conquering.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just brute force.
Well, absolutely not.
They were really smart about
Yeah.
how they took power.
Oh, very savvy. And speaking of savvy,
Yeah.
they weren't just about military dominance.
Okay.
They also created this vibrant syncretic culture,
Mhm.
blending Persian, Islamic, and Indian traditions.
Wow.
You can almost imagine like a tapestry
Oh, I like that.
with all these threads from different lands,
Yeah.
each one making it more rich and complex.
Okay, let's talk about that tapestry.
Sure.
What are some specific examples of this cultural fusion?
Well, look at Mughal architecture.
Okay.
It used Indian elements,
Like what?
like trap-beaded structures,
Okay.
which used horizontal beams and supports.
Yeah.
A classic feature of Indian architecture.
Hmm.
And you see those elegant chotras
Right.
on the rooftops and those intricate jallis, those
Mm.
carved stone screens.
They're beautiful.
They are blending right in with Persian and Islamic influences.
Oh, and we can't forget the Taj Mahal.
Of course.
It's like the perfect example of how they blended architectural styles.
Absolutely.
It's breathtaking.
And it wasn't just big structures like that.
Oh, right.
Think about the gardens.
Okay.
Like the Shalimar Bagh with its poetic landscapes and water features and flowers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
These gardens blended Persian charba designs
Right.
and the lush flora of
It's
India.
just so beautiful.
Or consider the Urdu language,
Uh-huh.
a fascinating blend of Persian Arabic and Hindi,
Okay.
which became like the common language of the Mughal court.
Wow.
It really symbolizes their commitment to cultural exchange.
It's amazing
It is.
how they blended all these different influences into one cohesive cultural identity.
Right.
But empires need more than culture, right?
Of course.
So how did they actually manage
Yeah.
such a big and complex empire?
Right.
Administratively, what were their innovations?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Governing an empire that stretches across so many landscapes and people
Yeah.
was a challenge.
Of course.
So to address this, they developed the Mansabdari system.
Oh, yeah.
This hierarchical structure granted land rights and military responsibility to nobles
Right.
in exchange for loyalty and service to the emperor.
I see.
It was a way to decentralize power while still maintaining control
Uh-huh.
and ensuring a flow of revenue
Okay.
to fund all their projects.
So it was a system built on power and obligation.
Yeah,
Was it actually effective?
it was for a long time.
Okay.
It allowed the Mughals to maintain stability and expand their empire,
Yeah.
but it had limitations,
Right.
like any system.
Right.
The Mansabdari wasn't without flaws.
Uh-huh.
Over time, it faced challenges,
Like-
corruption and the concentration of power among certain nobles.
Okay.
This eventually contributed to the decline of the Mughal Empire.
In later centuries.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Power dynamics are always shifting,
Right.
even in the best systems.
Absolutely.
But let's get back to the innovations.
Sure.
You mentioned revenue collection being crucial for the empire.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little more?
Certainly. The Mughals implemented this sophisticated system
Yeah.
called the Zabit system.
Okay.
It had a huge impact on agricultural practices
How so?
because it's standardized land measurement and assessment.
I see.
It was designed to create a steady flow of income to the treasury.
So it was like their economic engine,
You could say that.
fueling their projects and their military campaigns.
Yeah.
Did it have downsides, though?
Well,
Every time we talk about taxes,
right.
there are impacts on people.
That's an important point,
Yeah.
and one that historians debate. While the Zabit system was designed to be equitable,
Right.
it wasn't without its critics.
Yeah.
Some say it was too much of a burden on peasants,
Right.
that it could be exploitative,
Okay.
but others argue it brought stability and fairness
Yeah.
to a system that was chaotic before.
So like the Mansabdari,
Yeah.
the Zabit system had its complexities.
It did, and trade-offs.
And studying them and understanding their nuances
Yeah.
helps us paint a better picture of the Mughal era.
Right.
It wasn't just emperors and conquests.
Yeah.
It was this interplay of social, economic, and political forces.
And speaking of a complete picture,
Yes.
we can't forget about their art and architecture.
Oh, of course not.
The Taj Mahal is one example.
Right.
But what other parts of their artistic legacy stand out?
Well, think about the miniature paintings.
Oh, yeah.
They captured courtly life, historical events, and natural beauty with incredible detail.
Yeah.
They give us a glimpse into their aesthetic and cultural values.
Yeah.
I've always loved those paintings.
You're amazing.
They're like little windows into the past.
They really are.
And what about the chronicles and memoirs from this period?
Oh, absolutely.
They must give us incredible insights.
They do. Jahangir's memoirs are particularly fascinating.
Okay.
He documented his architectural tastes and projects,
I see.
giving us a look into his personality and the politics of the time.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't just the emperors.
All right.
We have accounts from travelers, courtiers, and even commoners,
Wow.
all offering valuable perspectives on life in the Mughal era.
It sounds like there's so much source material to explore.
Oh, there is.
It's like having a time machine.
You could say that.
We can experience this era firsthand.
And the more we look,
Yeah.
the more we realize how multifaceted the Mughal era was.
Yeah.
It was a time of huge ambition and artistic flourish and constant evolution.
Uh-huh.
And it left a permanent mark on India.
It really did.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much we've talked about, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I feel like we could spend hours
Absolutely.
talking about the architecture alone.
Or the cultural fusion.
Cultural fusion, yeah.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about how the Mughal Empire interacted with the world.
Uh-huh.
They weren't in a vacuum, right?
Not at all. The Mughals were part of a huge network of trade and diplomacy,
Right.
stretching from Europe all the way to East Asia.
Wow.
They traded a lot with the Portuguese and the Dutch,
Uh-huh.
and of course the British,
Right.
who ultimately became the dominant power in India.
Yeah.
These interactions had a massive impact on Indian history.
What was the nature of these relationships?
Well,
Was it just trade, or were there other things going on?
it was complicated.
Yeah.
Trade was definitely a major factor.
Uh-huh.
The Mughals had so many goods
Yeah.
that were in high demand in Europe.
Like what?
Spices, textiles, precious stones.
Wow.
But there were diplomatic exchanges too, and cultural influences,
Right.
and unfortunately sometimes conflict as well.
So it was a complex geopolitical landscape,
Yeah.
just like today.
Exactly.
It's amazing to see how those global connections played out.
It is.
Tech then.
And it shows us that even then,
Right.
the world was interconnected. We
Yeah.
often think of these isolated empires,
Uh-huh.
but they were really part of this global network of
Yeah.
exchange and interaction.
You know, we focus so much on emperors and conquests,
Right.
but what about everyday people?
That's a great point.
Yeah,
History isn't just about the elite. It's also
Yeah.
about the everyday lives of normal people.
exactly.
We see glimpses of that
Yeah.
through things like traveler accounts, court records, and even folk tales.
Okay.
These give us insight into how different social classes and religions
Yeah.
experienced life under Mughal rule.
What were some of the challenges they faced?
Yeah,
Every era has difficulties,
of course.
and I imagine life under a big empire.
Right.
Like, the Mughals would have its own set of obstacles.
One major challenge was economic inequality.
Okay.
Even though the Mughal era saw growth in trade and commerce,
Mm-hmm.
the benefits weren't always shared equally.
Right.
There were gaps in wealth and opportunity.
Yeah.
And lots of people struggled,
Uh-huh.
especially in rural areas or those in lower castes.
So even during times of prosperity,
Oh.
there were still social and economic challenges.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that progress isn't always linear,
Right.
and even the best empires have blind spots.
That's exactly right.
And that's why it's so important to see history
Yeah.
from different points of view.
Right.
Not just the rulers,
Uh-huh.
but the merchants, the farmers,
Exactly.
the artisans, the everyday people.
Yes, the people who made up the fabric of Mughal society.
And speaking of that fabric,
Yeah.
we mentioned religious tolerance earlier.
Right.
Akbar is known for his policy of sulikul.
Yeah.
But how did that work in practice?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
While his policy was groundbreaking,
Uh-huh.
promoting peace between different religious communities,
Right.
it was complicated.
Okay.
There were peaceful times and tolerant times,
Yeah.
but there was also conflict and persecution,
Right.
especially later on
Yeah.
when rulers like Aurangzeb had more hardline views.
So it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
There were attempts at dialogue and cooperation.
But also tension and intolerance.
Yeah. It shows
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
even with good intentions,
Right.
religious harmony in such a diverse empire is really hard.
It is. And it reminds us that history is rarely black and white.
Right.
It's nuanced and full of contradictions.
Mhm.
We have to acknowledge those complexities
Right.
when we study the past.
Let's go back to the big picture.
Sure.
The Mughal Empire did eventually decline and fall.
Yeah.
What were some of the key factors that led to that?
Well, like with most empires, there were multiple factors.
Internal conflicts, economic decline, the rise of regional powers,
Yeah.
and the growing influence of European trading companies
I see.
all contributed to the downfall.
Right.
The British East India Company
Uh-huh.
started as a trading company,
Yeah.
but they gradually gained political power.
Right.
They exploited the weaknesses of
Yeah.
a declining Mughal state.
So by 1857,
Yeah.
the Mughal Empire was officially dissolved.
Right.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Even the biggest empires
Right.
are vulnerable to internal and external pressures.
It's true.
It makes you think about the cycles of history
Yeah.
and how empires rise and fall.
It's a pattern we see over and over
Yeah.
from Rome to the Ottomans.
Right.
Empires are complex.
Uh-huh.
Their survival depends on a delicate balance.
Yeah.
When that's disrupted
Right.
by forces inside or out,
Mm-hmm.
decline is inevitable.
So what can we learn from the Mughals?
Well-
What resonates today?
One key takeaway is adaptation. Okay.
The Mughals were really good at adapting
Mhm.
to the Indian subcontinent.
Right.
They blended their traditions with new ones.
Yeah.
They understood that to rule well,
Yeah.
they needed to be inclusive
Right.
and build alliances.
It was a balance
It was.
between keeping their own identity
Mhm.
and integrating with Indian culture.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing.
Yeah,
Lots of rulers have struggled with that.
for sure.
And the Mughals didn't always get it right,
Right.
but their efforts at cultural synthesis
Yeah.
left a lasting legacy,
Uh-huh.
shaping India's art, architecture, and language.
And then there's the lesson about power, right?
Of course.
The Mughals,
Yeah.
like all empires,
Right.
had successes and failures.
Right? They had huge power.
Yeah.
But they also had challenges,
No.
especially when it came to diversity and unity
Yeah.
across such a vast territory.
Those challenges are still relevant today.
They are.
How do we manage diversity?
Right.
How do we create inclusive societies?
Uh-huh.
How do we balance rights with the needs of the state?
These are big questions
Yeah.
that still matter centuries later.
It's amazing
It is.
how history gives us so much insight
Yeah,
into today's world.
for sure.
But
Yeah.
what haven't we had time to explore?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
There are so many more stories, right?
And angles to consider.
One area we could look at
Yeah.
is the role of women.
Oh, yeah.
We tend to focus on the emperors,
Uh-huh.
but women had a lot of influence,
Right.
especially in the harem.
Right.
They were patrons of the arts,
Yeah.
advisors to their husbands, and
Mhm.
sometimes even rulers themselves.
We mentioned Nur Jahan briefly.
Yes.
Jahangir's wife.
Right.
She was really powerful.
She was.
And I'm sure there are many other stories
Oh, there are.
of remarkable women
Absolutely.
who shaped Mughal culture and politics.
Their stories are out there waiting to be told. They remind us that history isn't just about men with power,
Right.
but also about the women who made an impact
Yeah.
in more subtle but important ways.
This makes me think about all the unanswered questions.
Yeah,
About the Mughals.
right.
What mysteries or debates
Mm-hmm.
still fascinate historians?
One big debate is about Akbar's religious tolerance.
Okay.
Was it genuine
Yeah.
or a strategy to keep things stable?
Right.
Some historians say his motives were political.
Uh-huh.
Others say he was committed to interfaith understanding.
So we're trying to figure out his actions
Right.
and motivations.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle from centuries ago.
It is.
We have the pieces,
Uh-huh.
but maybe we'll never know
Right.
how they fit together.
And that's part of what makes history so interesting.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing investigation, a
Right.
constant process
Uh-huh.
of discovery and reinterpretation.
I like that.
Yeah.
As we find new evidence and perspectives,
Right.
our understanding of the past changes
It does.
and evolves.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how these debates keep the past alive. You know, it's like we're having a conversation with the Mughals
I love that analogy.
across centuries,
Yeah.
trying to understand their world
Yeah.
and how it affected our own.
Speaking of conversations,
Yeah.
I think it's time we turn to our listener.
Oh, good idea.
We've covered a lot today
We have,
about the Mughal Empire,
right from their rise and fall to their conquests and innovations.
their administration, even how they interacted with the rest of the world.
What are some of the takeaways that have resonated with you?
Yes. What stood out? What's made you curious?
We've been so caught up in our own conversation.
know.
We haven't given you much of a chance to chime in.
So, listener, what has piqued your interest?
What really grabbed your attention?
Maybe you're interested in the architecture,
Oh, yeah, like the Taj Mahal or the
Yeah.
Red Fort,
thinking about how they were built,
the symbolism.
the lives of the artisans,
Or maybe you're fascinated by the cultural fusion,
the way they blended Persian, Islamic, and Indian traditions,
creating new art forms,
foods,
even a whole new language, Urdu.
or perhaps you're thinking about the complexities of empire,
Yeah, the challenges of ruling such a vast and diverse place.
the issues of power.
The lessons we can learn from the Mughal successes and failures.
Whatever it is, keep exploring.
Yes, delve deeper into those sources.
Read the accounts from travelers and historians.
Visit museums and monuments.
Immerse yourself in the Mughal era.
It's a fascinating period.
It is. And as you learn more, we want to hear from you.
Yes, share your thoughts, your questions, your insights.
Let's keep this conversation going.
Because history isn't just about the past
It helps us understand the present.
and shape the future.
Exactly.
So until next time, keep those minds curious
Keep asking questions.
and keep diving deep into history.
You never know.
Maybe one day we'll be talking about your discovery
That's right.
on a future episode of The Deep Dive.